Hi to all the Zill fam out there. My name is Chase Raz, and this is the Zilliqa Observer. Today, I've got some good news for you. Of course, the first package portal governance vote is here. Let's take a look at what it is, what it does, and in order to get started, go ahead and go to governance.zilliqa.com and connect your ZillPay wallet that has your package portal tokens in it, your port tokens, and you're going to be able to vote. So let's go to the governance portal for port. That's kind of funny, the portal for package portal. And we want to click and see what the active proposals are. We're looking for the active proposal called export implementation, or rather, no, you know what I was going to say, there's a longer title, but there's not. It is just export implementation. And what I want to do with you is walk through what this is, what it entails, how the dynamics of it work. So let's go ahead and get started. The vote is already open. It opened over the weekend, April 10th, 2021, and it will close on the 15th. So Monday, today is Monday the 12th when I'm recording. This is going to close on Thursday, April 15th. So look, let's just go through, but the long and the short is PackagePortal wants to roll out the export token, which if you've read the white paper for PackagePortal is the second token in a series of potentially 3 that PackagePortal relies upon. The first of which was Port, which is the governance token we're using to make this vote. And it's also to this point been the reward for scanning. If you scan a package and it's validated and it goes through and all that stuff, you get 1 port. So this proposal is designed to change that, move us into phase 2 of the white paper. Originally, the idea was to have 7 million scans unlock port. But that number was a guess based on how long it would take PackagePortal to roll out. The idea was let's spread port far and wide. The thing is that the adoption curve was much steeper than predicted. So port went far and wide much faster than predicted. There wasn't as much seeding necessary, if you will. And because of this, of course, PackagePortal gets a lot of criticism. There's this question of how much is port worth? Is it a scam? As all these things come into question if you don't really understand the tokenomics, because no one out there is trying to tell you currently while recording the price of port is somewhere around $100, $105, $110. It's fluctuating today. We typically fluctuate between $80 and $120. No one in the world is out here telling you that sure, you can go shopping online, get a parcel delivered to you, and that's worth, let's call it $100. That's not sustainable. We all know that. So what is the valuation, right? You can see my previous videos on that, why the valuation seems to be accurate, why it's not, just some arbitrary number. But it does present a problem that now we've moved in that adoption curve so quickly that effectively the value of a scan is that $100. So there needs to be a separation here. There needs to be a separation between the governance and the scan token. And that's what this proposal is trying to do. So here's what's going to happen. Export, if this passes, would roll out immediately, like within, I believe, 2 weeks of the vote closing, within 2 weeks of this upcoming Thursday. Remember, export was always coming out. This was always going to happen, just at a slightly different time. The change that's happened is instead of pegging export to $1 US redemptive, export is being considered to be pegged to port itself at 0.01 port. What this effectively does is it means when you scan, 100 scans would equal the governance token. 100 export would equal 1 port. That's really where the value and the tokenomics were designed to be. That's where port was originally when it was soft pegged to $1 US. So it does differ from the original white paper, and they call this out here, saying that it differs by a factor of 10. If port is sitting at $100, then it's not quite a factor of 10. I'm not agreeing with that number specifically, because export was always meant to be $1. And this is, if port is $100, then 1/100th is $1. So I'm not sure why the factor of 10 is being brought in, but either way, that could be something in my understanding, not anybody else's. So there's this moment where people say, wait a second, so the redemptive value of a scan is going to drop way down. Yes and no, right? Yes, in the sense that you get a port right now when you scan, and that's generally worth plus or minus $100 US. No, in the sense that port was not originally worth $100. That's the market doing that based on the governance, based on the optimism of future revenues for this project, based on how this project says it's going to handle revenues, etc., etc., etc. So yeah, right, it's dropping from 100-ish to $1, but keep in mind that before that, we went from $1 to $100 when that was way premature for what was expected. But here's the key. For those of you who have been scanning your packages, for those of you who have been buying port even on the side, there's this question of, wait. So now we're not going to be able to earn this port. But I want you to temper that for a moment, because let's look at this next section. Every time port is redeemed by a user. So the idea for our export, instead of floating it in liquidity pools and having it, pegged to $1 in the traditional thing that port did, pegging export to port helps avoid some of those headaches. So what happens is when you earn export, when you scan and earn one export each scan, one per day. Still, there hasn't been a governance proposal to change that yet. But as you earn that one export per day, assuming you do, you can convert that export, any quantity of it. You don't have to wait until you accumulate 100. You can do one-on-one if you want. It's for transaction fees, it's probably best to group a few. But you can exchange that export for fractional or whole port, depending on how much you have. But still, the original port holders, this far and wide distribution, we start asking, who is this port going to? Are we going to be diluted out? Well, no, because every time port is redeemed by a user in the process I just described, the equivalent amount will be unlocked by holders and LPs. So when the 10% weekly rewards to everyone who's holding ends, everyone right now gets 10% per week. Holders, LP, when that ends towards the end of June is what we know, every single port or fraction thereof that scanners unlock, we as port holders split proportionally. That's great. So the next million port that goes out, we are going to split proportionally a million port as well. That's really good for maintaining our position, our early positions. That's very beneficial to early holders. So hint, if you're not scanning for port now, get going, right? Get going on those scans. But we need to look at this a little bit deeper. All 100 million export, that's the value, that's the total supply of export. All 100 million, because of that exchange rate of 1 to 0.01, all of those 100 million will be able to earn a total of 1 million port. That means that existing holders, we're going to unlock 1 million port by doing virtually nothing except for letting people scan and convert their export to port. This means that the 100 million port essentially unlocks 2 million port, but remember, 1 million goes to scanners, 1 million goes to holders. That's pretty big. And if you're a scanner and a holder, that's really advantageous. So when we look at the idea of, my scan's only going to be, closer to $1, give or take, based on market fluctuations of port. That's true, but that's also missing the forest for the trees. It's also a very short-sighted view of PackagePortal's long-term dynamics and the fact that in terms of when I talk about the user adoption, understand that the drastic curve I mentioned is in the early adopter stage. We haven't even really gotten to innovators. We haven't even gotten anywhere near mainstream. And so the curve itself was only within that early adopters phase. That first, typically academically, we put it about the first 2.5% or so of adopters. I haven't looked at total adoption to calculate it out to see what percentage of estimated max we're at. I haven't done that, but the context is important here. So scrolling down, I'm actually going to keep skipping a little bit. By the way, the distribution, that 1 million port as people scan, that's going to be a monthly distribution rather than weekly. That way, more scans have time to accumulate, and then we can get a larger, I don't want to say payout, but a larger reward, a larger percentage reward for our holdings later on. But we need to talk about this port that's going to be released in these monthly chunks to holders and LPs. It's not going to be evenly distributed like it currently is within the 10% rewards. What's going to happen instead is that there's going to be a 60-30 split. And I know, 60 plus 30 equals 90, but let's talk about this really quickly. JG, Gabe, and the team over at PackagePortal really do believe in making the world better. You know, we have that joke about startups that everybody says, well, I want to improve the world. I want to make the world better. I think, you know, they're quintessentially the type of startup that truly believes this in their core, but they understand you can't just come out and say, well, that's what we're doing, right? That's our mission. No, their mission is getting this logistics data, getting the supply chain data, all of the stuff we've talked about before. So in order to address how do we make the world better, they are allocating 10% of the rewards that we would earn as holders. They're saying right now, open and clear, as a part of this proposal that you're going to vote for, they want to retain 10% of that for charitable, altruistic, and other causes. They're saying charitable donations. And look, I'm going to leave this for you to determine whether you're okay for this and you vote, yes, as a large part of this larger proposal, or if this is a deal breaker for you. I'm going to leave that for you. I won't even say my answer with it. So let's just look at what is. The 60-30 split between holders and LPs goes like this. If you simply hold port, you're helping the ecosystem by not flooding the market with these governance tokens is essentially devaluing them, right? By saying, well, they're worth less to me than the ZIL or the other tokens or even currency that I could receive. So by holding, you're signaling something to the market, and PackagePortal believes it should be rewarded. 30% of what's unlocked by scanners, remember in those monthly distributions, is going to be sent to people who are simply holding port in their wallet. You don't have to do anything except keep port in your wallet. 60%, the lion's share here, sort of a pun with JG's business name, but the lion's share here is going to go to people who are providing liquidity. Now, this is pretty deep, and I'm going to make it quick. But of course, they want to incentivize liquidity providers here. But also understand what happens when people put more port and more ZIL into the port ZIL pool on ZILSwap. When you do that, when you add more funds, the K, the constant that determines the exchange rate, that determines the exchange rate between those two tokens, it increases. The constant increases. Because if you've seen my other videos, you know that a DEX operates on some type of market maker. And the market maker that most DEXs, including ZILSwap, use is the constant product market maker, CPMM. And so I'm not going to go into the dynamics of that, but there's something called a constant, which if you put liquidity in, and people in mass put liquidity in a particular point, it's almost like that zoom slider. If you're in Microsoft Word or Excel or PowerPoint, and you feel it kind of stick at that 100%, right? We in our mind get a tactile sensation, even though there isn't one. That's effectively what this uneven distribution is designed to affect. That people going into the liquidity pool lowers things like slippage, lowers all these problems with exchanging, so that these exchanges can be facilitated without as drastic of a disruption to the price. So think about this. If you and I hold a bunch of port outside of liquidity pools, and there's only one exchange currently that lists port, and that's ZILSwap. If somebody comes in and starts buying or selling, they're going to be able to arbitrarily and artificially influence the price more than they should be able to. The reason is because the calculation of price is based on the volume in the pool and the ratio of the tokens in the pool. Again, you can take a look at my other videos about liquidity mining and about ZILSwap and some of my other videos. But this is designed to incentivize those who provide liquidity for that reason. So great, that 100 million is unlocking the 100 million export is unlocking 2 million port. Great. 1 million of that port is being exchanged for, and people who are scanning are getting that in their wallets, and they can sell it, hold it, whatever they want to do. The other 1 million is being unlocked as rewards by port holders. Great. What happens to the export? What happens to this 100 million export supply? Let's take a look. If I scroll down just a bit, you're going to see that 90% of it that's redeemed. So of the export that is redeemed for port, 90% of it, poof, it's burned. It's gone. It is no more. 10% is going to be stored for future rewards, and this is going to be important. This is really going to be important. Take a look at this part. Once the max supply of export has been mined by scans and 90% burned, the remaining 10% of export will be rewarded to port holders and LPs evenly. So those of us who hold port, at the end of this process, we're going to get what essentially amounts to an airdrop of export, the remaining amount of export, the last bits, that 10% that was held as people redeemed it. And that, what is it? I think 10 million port? Yeah, 10 million export? That 10 million export is going to lock an additional 1 million port. And you say, well, now how am I going to earn it? How am I going to earn it? Because the scans, are going to move on to something else, probably import at that time. And remember, that 10 million port is going to be airdropped to us. And that 1 million port at that time opens up. So it's an additional reward cycle of saying, here, we're reaching the end of export. We've reached the end of export. Here's another million port to spread around. That's big. So effectively, once you factor in the 10% retention of expended export, you get to a point to where 100 million export being redeemed leads to token holders receiving 2 million port. 1 million unlocked by scanners. Holders and LPers are splitting, some evenly, some unevenly, 2 million port. That's pretty cool. There are those folks who are particularly clever with tokenomics, and they might say, if I withhold my export and wait till the end event, then guess what I can do? Because at the end, the tokenomics switches, and instead of 100 export for one port, that final rewards is 10 export for one export. I didn't call that out, but it's right here. The ratio will change at that time. When that final 10 million export are given to existing holders and LPs, the ratio changes from 100 to 1 to 10 to 1. So somebody, could sit there and say, you know what, I'm going to hold my export. I'm not going to redeem my export, and I'm going to wait for that event. Here's the catch. If somebody does that, some users will hold export rather than converting to port before the ratio reversion is enacted. Okay. Just calling it out right here. You're going to scan, you're going to get export, and you're going to hold it because you're waiting on that 10 to 1 ratio. In this event, all 100 million export may not redeem the max 1 million port available. Any remaining port will be set aside for future rewards. Meaning it's cute that people are going to try that, right, to game the system. But what it's going to do is it's just going to keep slow trickling more port to existing holders and LPs, again, liquidity providers, and prevent the person holding out and everyone else who's scanning from being able to tap into that 10 to 1 conversion, because that final million port is not going to be unlocked. That 10 to 1 ratio is not going to go into effect until after that export airdrop happens, to where the only people who have export left are those who are holders and LPs. I think the holders are going to like that. And frankly, look, I think scanners, even if you're just getting involved now, or if your country's not able to participate now but will be in the future, I think everybody can look at that and say that's fair. The only unfairness there is if legality or spamming or any other situation prevented your country from being a part of it to get any port in the first place. But honestly, that's outside the control of PackagePortal. There's a whole deep dive in the logistics world that I could do on that. But again, I'm trying to focus on what this proposal is and not necessarily explaining the logistics world on a global scale in this particular video. So, I mean, that argument can be made, but this is about as fair as you can, be. So last couple points here. What are the dynamics of exchanging export to port? You're just going to send export to a smart contract address, and it's going to send back port. You don't have to wait until you have 100 export, like I said before. You don't have to do any type of complex web interface. You just transfer your export to an address. It sends back port in whatever fractional or whole amount you're transacting. The reason this is being done is, and you can actually see the list here, the value of export externally is near zero. So it's worth, export is worth 1/100th of a port initially, but still the redemptive value of export itself is virtually nil, is virtually nothing. It's designed to be redeemed through port, not through external means, not through anything else. This does change a little bit when it comes to the rewards warehouse that was planned, I believe, because the purpose is to expend export on port, not on merch, on other things. I imagine that's still coming down the road. I have some indication that that's still coming down the road, but not now, not with export, if it is at all. So why do this? Why have where you send to a contract? It prevents the burden of liquidity provision, so that what happened in phase one, admittedly, is a lot of us held port and we didn't LP it. That's problematic for the market for the reasons I've described within this video and within other videos. So it just preempts that issue altogether. And the rewards are now going into place to encourage liquidity provisioning into port. It prevents price manipulation related to all of those topics, drives the market value to port exclusively. So in other words, the port value can be maintained as not being unsustainable, while the scan still results in a roughly dollar-ish range, or 1/100th of a port, whatever that is. It basically sets everything right back into balance where it was expected to be in the first place. And we all know that these crazy, wonderful 10% weekly rewards were simply to encourage the spread of port. And guess what? It worked even better than anyone could have ever guessed. So then, there are some other factors here, and I'll let you look through these final three at your leisure. They're on screen here, but right, I think we've talked about the highlights. If you are a port holder or a provider into the liquidity pools, the only other thing I want you to know right now is that summer shipments are coming. This is a 500,000 port that's going to be airdropped to us. This is right after the 10% weekly rewards end. So if you're thinking of dumping at that time, look, that decision is yours and yours to make alone. People will call you all sorts of things, from smart to dumb, for doing that. I'm not going to weigh in on that decision. I have my personal decision made on what I'm doing, but PackagePortal acknowledges that there are varying opinions on this. And so in order to get us from here to there, from 10% weekly to where scanning unlocks port for us on essentially a 1-to-1 ratio that ultimately at the end of it becomes a 2-to-1 ratio, where we get 2 million port as holders and LPers, split somewhat unevenly because of the LP issue, where scanners get 1 million, blah, 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 right? That's a lot of talking. But in order to sweeten the deal between here and there, and to make sure everything works, 500,000 port are going to be released as airdrops to holders and liquidity providers between the end of June and around the start of the holiday season this year, around November. So look, there's plenty in this to break apart. There's plenty in this to understand, but I think I've done as best as I can possibly do to outline what the proposal contains and how to wrap our heads around what it entails. So at this point, it's up to you. You can come cast your vote to ship it, to go with this, or to return it and say, no, get back to the drawing board and see what's going to happen. We can take a look up towards the top. The quorum is 10%. We know this ends this upcoming Thursday. Currently, right now, with 194,000 port, 99.8 are voting in favor of this. I will say that of the contacts that I have in the Zilliqa space, I probably know people equivalent to about 150 to 200,000 port directly that I'm in contact with any given day. And I don't know any one of them that is in the return it column, including the ones obviously who haven't voted yet, and are currently abstaining from vote depending on the outcome. So this is a very popular proposal right now, and I want to give you a sense of the scale of this. 194,000 port currently against under 400 port. Let's take a look at the overall supply for a moment, and I'm just going to check this in Zillstream to get it for the moment. It's a little bit smaller on the screen. I'm not going to zoom in. Current price is 103. Current supply, let me go to the current in circulation amount. Under 1 million port, so 849, so let's call it 850,000 port. When we're looking here, almost 200,000 of those 850, so 200 of 850 are already cast in favor. Like I said, a good number of outstanding votes also in favor are waiting on the sidelines. I'll say this, I'm not going to give you where I lean on this, but the port holders are currently speaking. If you do dissent for any reason, it's probably going to behoove you to get that voice out there, start voting, doing this, that, and the other. And if you approve of this, let me give you the same bit of advice. It's going to behoove you to get people, rally them, and vote for it. Just because you see this massive lead doesn't mean, all right, there's a lot outstanding, doesn't mean somebody can't come in and tip the balance here. So I think all too often people get really comfortable with these wide margins. Don't, right? That's something we're going to get burnt at some point in one direction or the other. And if you haven't already, just know that's when you have these low quorums, something like 10%, that's really easy to do. We can think, oh, wow, this is in the bag. Never think that. Whatever your opinion on this is, go through, read for yourself, watch this video, consult with other holders, do whatever your due diligence is. And then I would encourage you, come in and make this vote. Don't sit on the sidelines. Get in, make the vote. All right, that's all from me. As always, I hope this is helpful. Feel free to subscribe to this channel if you're new to it. I don't do a lot of subscribe and notification bell and all those call outs. But if you do want to reach me for any reason, I'm at Chase Raz on Twitter and Telegram. And of course, the Zilliqa Observer is on Twitter at Zilliqa Observer. Take care, everybody.